Alright, hey guys, what's up? Blazer here, and today I'm going to be doing a Retribution Paladin Pvp guide for patch 10.2.7, and we're going to go over the talents first, the gear and stats, then the enchants, the macros, and last rotation. Okay, so let's get into the talents first. Now, for the paladin tree, first three things you want is lay on hands, because you can use lay on hands in arenas now. And as someone who does a lot of solo shuffles and arenas, it's really helpful. Then Blessing of Freedom, you're going to need that to get out of slows, CCs, and other movement impairing effects. Then Hammer of Wrath. Then next is Obduracy, so it increases your speed by 2%. Then next one is Auras of Swift Vengeance. Next is Greater Judgment. Next one is Divine Steed, because that's your mobility right there. That's going to help you catch casters much faster. Then next will be 2 points into Fist of Justice. And why this is because each holy power that you spend will reduce the Hammer of Justice cooldown by 2 seconds. Next will be Cavalier, which will give Divine Steed 2 charges. And the next one is Seasoned Warhorse, so your Divine Steed lasts 2 seconds longer. And then this is a must to have. It is Rebuke. It's the Paladin's kick, so spec into that. Next is Justification, increases judgment damage by 10%. Next is Punishment, because successfully interrupting an enemy with Rebuke will cast an instant Crusader Strike on the target. And of course, this is your burst ability, Avenging Wrath. You're going to need that. Then put 2 points into Holy Aegis, because armor and critical strike chance are increased by 4%. Then next is Sanctified Plates, because you're going to need that extra 20% increased armor against melee classes. And it also increases your stamina by 10%. Then Blessing of Protection, because this is useful in arenas against other melee classes, so they cannot physically damage you. And then Unbound Freedom, because Blessing of Freedom will increase your movement speed by 30%, which will make you much faster, and that helps a lot with mobility. Then Unbreakable Spirit, because it reduces the cooldown of Divine Shield, Shield of Vengeance, Divine Protection, and Lay on Hands by 30%, which is a lot. Then Crusader's Reprieve, because it increases the range of your Crusader Strike. And Rebuke also auto attacks by 3 yards, which is a good gap closer. Then Faith's Armor, because Word of Glory will give you a 20% armor boost for like 4.5 seconds. And then you're going to want to go into Seal of Alacrity because it increases your haste by 4% and your judgment cooldown is reduced by 1 second. And next is Divine Purpose because your holy power abilities will have a 10% chance to make any of your holy power spending abilities free, like Templar's Verdict or Word of Glory, and it will deal 10% increased healing or damage on top of that. And next is Seal of Might because mastery is increased by 4% and strength increased by 4%. So that's a must. 2 points into that. Next will be of Dusk and Dawn because your next holy power spending ability will deal 20% increased damage. Next is Divine Toll. You must get Divine Toll because it is a part of the rotation, which is very important. And then Seal of the Crusader. You can spec one time or 2 times into this, but I just went 1 time. And for the last 2 is Divine Resonance. After casting Divine Toll, you instantly cast Judgment for every 5 seconds for 15 seconds. So that's a very good talent. And then next is Fading Light, which is pretty helpful because it increases the damage or healing of your next holy power spending spell or ability by 10%, which would increase Word of Glory or Templar's Verdict. Now next is the Retribution talent tree. Now, Blade of Justice, get this. Divine Storm also, get this. And spec into Swift Justice because it reduces the cooldown of Judgment by 2 seconds and Crusader Strike by 2 seconds. And by this reducing the cooldown of Judgment and Crusader Strike, it also helps. Now, if you're more spec'd into haste and your stats are all haste, this will really bring the cooldown to come off much faster. Now next is Expurgation. Your Blade of Justice causes the target to burn for 36,000 radiant damage over 9 seconds. So that's like your damage over time right there. Next, spec into Judgment of Justice because Judgment deals 10% increased damage and increases your movement speed by 10%. So that will stack very nicely with Blessing of Freedom's 30% increased movement speed. Next, go into Improved Blade of Justice. This will give Blade of Justice 2 charges. And next is Guided Prayer. Spec into this because when you're below 25%, it instantly casts Word of Glory for free at 60% effectiveness on you. Next, you're going to want to go into this because Templar's Verdict, Final Verdict, and Justicar's Vengeance will have a 20% chance to reset the cooldown of Blade of Justice. Next will be Zealot's Fervor because it increases your auto attack speed by 20%. And also Rush of Light because the critical strikes, whenever you critically strike from your damaging single target, holy power abilities. It grants you 5% haste for 10 seconds, which will also help your spells and abilities to come off of the cooldown much faster, so you can use it again. Next is Blade of Vengeance, because Blade of Justice now hits nearby enemies for 29,000 holy damage. And the next one is Shield of Vengeance. You're going to need this because it is a very important Retribution Paladin defensive cooldown that everyone should have and should spec into. Okay, so right here, I'm going to argue about these two talents specifically, because if you spec just into Final Verdict, okay, because it replaces Templar's Verdict, it deals more damage than Justicar's Vengeance. But the thing about Justicar's Vengeance is it will heal you for 5% of your maximum health, which really does help. So you don't have to rely on Word of Glory or Flash of Light so much if you're getting pressured or there's somebody on you in arenas. But the thing about Justicar's Vengeance is that sometime in Dragonflight, they nerfed the damage whenever a target is stunned, right? And when that target is stunned and you use Justicar's Vengeance on it, the damage is increased by 25%, which at that time, before the nerf, was kind of better than Final Verdict or Templar's Verdict. But for me personally, I spec into Final Verdict because it does more damage. Now, next is Jurisdiction. Final Verdict and Blade of Justice deal 10% increased damage, and it increases the range by 20 yards, which is very helpful against casters. Next one is Boundless Judgment. Judgment generates 1 additional holy power, so it will generate 2 instead of 1, and that will be very helpful to the rotation. Now, next is Templar Strikes, because this is a combo and it really is much faster than just having Crusader Strike, because Templar Strikes and Templar Slash is like a combo that you can use repeatedly on a target that you're in melee range of. So spec into this because it's very important to the rotation also. Next is Divine Wrath. It increases the duration of Avenging Wrath or Crusade by 3 seconds, so we get that. Please do. Next is Blessed Champion. Crusader Strike and Judgment hit an additional 2 targets but deal 50% reduced damage to secondary targets. Now, just go 1 into this, and that should be good enough. Now, next, okay, we're going to be a little informative here now. Avenging Wrath, okay, this will increase your critical chance by 20%, and also if you choose to spec into Mastery, this along with the critical chance will really help your burst do so much more damage. But the thing is, for me, I went into Crusade because now my playstyle is very fast and very quick, and I'm more into haste because haste, what it does is the more haste you have, your abilities and spells will come off of cooldown much faster, and that will allow you to attack your targets more quickly and all that. And next is Aegis of Protection, because Divine Protection reduces damage you take by an additional 10%, and Shield of Vengeance will absorb 10% more incoming damage to you. So get this because it's very important for your defensive abilities. And Heart of the Crusader. Crusader Strike and auto attacks deal 10% increased damage and deal 10% increased critical strike damage. Next is High Lord's Judgment. Now just spec into this one time because Judgment's duration is increased by 3 seconds. If you have Greater Judgment, targets take 20% increased damage from your 2 Holy Power abilities. Also spec into Adjudication, because the critical strike damage from your abilities will be increased by 5%. And Hammer of Wrath, critical strikes cause a Blessed Hammer to spiral outward, dealing 4,900 holy damage to enemies. Now, next one is Blades of Light. Crusader Strike, Judgment, Hammer of Wrath, and your damaging single target Holy Power abilities deal Holy Strike damage. Next is Divine Arbiter. You're going to spec into this because at 25 stacks, your next damaging single target Holy Power ability causes 100,000 Holy Strike damage to your primary target and 21,000 Holy Strike damage to enemies within 6 yards. Now, here you can spec into either one if you want, but me personally, I spec into Final Reckoning because it causes targets to take 30% increased damage from your Holy Power abilities for 12 seconds. And next is Divine Auxiliary. Final Reckoning and Execution Sentence grant 3 Holy Power. So either way, if you're spec'd into Final Reckoning or Execution Sentence, specking into this will have them both generate 3 Holy Power, which helps a lot with the rotation. Now, next is Wake of Ashes. You must get Wake of Ashes because it is a very crucial ability in a Retribution Paladin's rotation. Now, next is Seething Flames, because this will cause Wake of Ashes to attack 2 extra times for 54,000 radiant damage. And next is Wake of Ashes. I'm sorry, this one is Truth's Wake. Wake of Ashes also causes targets to burn for an additional 59,000 radiant damage over 9 seconds.
I don't have a target.
So that will also help with the Blade of Justice own damage over time. That will like stack nicely. And next for PvP talents. Now, for me, for arenas and battlegrounds, I spec'd into Searing Glare. And why is because this will cause the targets within 25 yards to miss their spells, abilities, and attacks for 4 seconds. So let's say a rogue, a warrior, or a death knight pops their burst on you, and that will cause them to just miss everything for 4 seconds, which will literally diminish their burst damage, so you're not getting hit by their burst damage for their full duration. And then Blessing of Spell Warding. Why this is because all casters, their spells will not be able to damage you for 10 seconds, and that's a pretty long time. So you can use this and then Divine Shield after that. And why this is because it's helpful in arenas and battlegrounds, because casters can damage you for 10 whole seconds and you're just immune to their spells. Next is Aura of Reckoning. Now at 100 stacks of Reckoning, your next weapon swing deals 200 increased damage, will critically strike, and also activates Crusade or Avenging Wrath for 9 seconds. And that's like 9 whole seconds of wings up and doing more damage. So we're going to for sure have this. Okay, now next is I'm going to go into gear and the stats, and we're going to go over why we choose these stats and also other opinions on choosing different stats. Okay, so now for the gear and stats, there's 2 ways this can go. For Retribution Paladins, now Mastery increases holy damage done. So the more mastery that you have stat into your character, the more damage like Templar Strike, Final Verdict, and Blade of Justice, and Judgment, and the rest of your holy power and holy damage dealing abilities will do. And now going into critical strike, you should mix your gear with like half mastery or a little more than half mastery and a bit of critical strike. You gotta mix your gear with that. So when you're at the PvP vendor, spend a little bit on critical strike gear, but you're gonna want to spend more on mastery because that increases your holy damage done by all of your abilities and spells. But for me personally, I am more spec'd into haste because my haste is at 26%, my mastery is at 21%, my critical strike is just at 13%. Now, why I have more haste is because I choose more haste. Because why is all of your abilities and spells, the more haste that you have, the faster they get off of cooldown, which allows you to attack more faster. And with the way Retribution Paladins are, they're very fast paced now. You can't be a slow player, you can't be slow on your fingers and all that, like with other classes like Rogue or DK. No, the way Retribution Paladin is now, it's a very fast-paced playstyle, and that is why I spec into haste more and all that, because I'm a very fast-paced kind of playstyle player, and well, it's just in Battle for Azeroth, in Shadowlands, in Legion, I always went into haste because of the way that Retribution Paladins are designed nowadays than they were in earlier expansions and all that. So for me personally, I go into haste, but you can choose for yourself if you want to have your abilities deal more damage. You can go into mastery, and that's also good too. Either one, mastery or haste, you should have either one as your main stat. But for me, my main stat is haste. And then now we will go into the enchants and why we are getting these enchants. Alright, now for the enchants. Now, your cloak should have homebound speed, because this increases your movement speed by a certain percent. Next is sustained strength. Now, sustained strength because strength is a Retribution Paladin's main stat. Now, next is for bracers, you're going to get 200 plus speed, which will help a lot with your mobility. And next, for your legs, you're going to want to enchant it with plus 177 agility / strength and plus 131 stamina. So that increases your strength and your stamina, which strength is a Ret Paladin's main stat, and who wouldn't want a little more stamina. Now, next is Plains Runner's Breeze, because this increases your speed by a certain percent. And then next is both of your rings should be enchanted with 82 versatility, and this will increase your versatility much more. Now, all PvP gear has versatility in it, so don't worry about getting that stat, because that's already a hand in hand with the PvP gear. Okay, now next is the macros. Alright, now this is my burst macro, and it is /cast Crusade or Avenging Wrath, and then /use your PvP trinket that increases your primary stat. And then next is /use Saltwater Potion. Now keep in mind that the saltwater potions do not work in they do not work in arenas, they only work in battlegrounds. So if you're in battlegrounds and you have saltwater potions, this will increase your damage by 30%. And I will show also where to get the saltwater potions. And then for your defensive macro, slash cast Divine Protection, and then slash use Potion of Defiance. Now, the Potion of Defiance decreases the damage that you take by a certain percentage, so that stacking with Divine Protection will really decrease the damage that you're taking and all that. So Divine Protection reduces all damage you take by 30%, and I don't have any Potion of Defiance in my inventory, but I believe it's 20% or 30% reduced damage that you take if you use Potion of Defiance. And you can only use Potion of Defiance in battlegrounds. You cannot use them in arenas or rated battlegrounds. Okay, but now I'll show where you can get saltwater potions and potions, or the, what is that thing called? Potion of Defiance and saltwater potions. Okay, so we are going to go to Borealis, and honestly, not much people nowadays really know or actually remember where you can go to buy these potions, okay? And they are over here. You just go this way into Borealis, and here is the Battle for Azeroth PvP vendors. Now here you can buy saltwater potions with Mark of Honor, and also the Potion of Defiance with the Mark of Honor. And this will really help you a lot in battlegrounds if you use them in the macros that I just showed you. And now let's go into the rotation. Alright, now for the rotation, you're going to pop your burst macro, and then Wake of Ashes, Final Verdict, Divine Toll, Final Verdict, Holy Reckoning, Final Verdict, Hammer of Wrath, and then Blade of Justice and Templar Strikes, but make sure you always have your Judgment applied to your target, because that increases the damage it takes. Now, always stay on your toes with Templar Strike, Templar Slash, Blade of Justice, and rinse and repeat with Final Verdict. And while you're waiting for Wake of Ashes, Divine Toll, and Reckoning to come off of cooldown, you're going to want to stick with Templar Strike, Templar Slash, Judgment, and Blade of Justice until Wake of Ashes, Divine Toll, and Reckoning come off of cooldown. And as you can see, I am always constantly pressing 4 to 5 abilities at the same time. And that's because of my haste build. And that's why I said haste really helps a lot with your abilities coming off of cooldown and all that. So pretty much. And also always use Hammer of Wrath whenever it's available, or whenever you have Crusade or Avenging Wrath up. So Wake of Ashes, Final Verdict. Divine Toll, Final Verdict. Final Reckoning, Final Verdict. And then rinse and repeat with Blade of Justice, Templar Slash and Templar Strike combos, and always have your Judgment applied to the target. And well, that's pretty much it for my Retribution Paladin PvP guide for 10.2.7. And I hope that all other Retribution Paladins find this very helpful and informative. And again, thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it. And have a good one.